Welcome. I'm so glad to see you all. I know many of you, but not everybody. So as a quick introduction, I am Rabbi Sarah Berman, and I am the Director of Adult Education here at Central Synagogue. And I am so happy to be here tonight with my colleague Carolyn Ressler and with our friends and colleagues from StoryCorps, Emily Jansen and Mara Johnson. This project that we are introducing tonight, this partnership that we're introducing tonight, is part of our ongoing project of sharing our stories. This is a year-long initiative here in Central's community to share who we really are with one another. We build our relationships, we build our community by knowing each other, by sharing of ourselves with one another. And I'm seeing participants from our genealogy workshop already, and our memoir writing workshop, and our ethical wills workshop. And this is one more platform. This might be the key platform for our community sharing our stories with one another. And this is our oral history, our storytelling project. This is a partnership that we've been planning and waiting to announce for several months now. And it comes from conversations and planning that I've been doing with my colleague, Lauren Dickel, who isn't able to be here tonight, but is a crucial part of this whole project. So why StoryCorps? StoryCorps is known as a nonprofit known for helping people tell their stories in ways that other people can hear. These are sometimes very difficult stories. They're sometimes very funny stories. But StoryCorps helps people share their humanity with one another. And there's nothing that I want more for our community than for us to be able to do that with one another. So with that, Emily and Mara are going to take us through what StoryCorps is and how we will be doing this. Emily Jansen is the Associate Director of Learning and Engagement, and Mara Johnson is the Senior Associate of Learning and Engagement, both at StoryCorps. So Emily and Mara, thank you so much for doing this. Thank you for being here, and I can't wait to hear what stories you are going to share with our community tonight.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Berman. I think Emily's going to jump on and give a quick introduction, and we're just so glad to see you all this evening. Thank you all for taking the time out of your busy lives to be with us this evening. We're going to bring up some slides and get started. We have a really engaging hour planned to spend together, where we'll be sharing some stories from our archive and just telling you a bit about what to expect from this partnership and how we'll be working together. So we're really excited. Emily, are you all set, ready to get going?
Yes, thank you, Mara. I just needed to get organized a little bit there. Yeah, as Mara said, I also want to say thank you to the synagogue, and in particular to Rabbi Berman and the whole team for inviting us to be a part of sharing our stories, to be with you tonight. I'm so glad that all of you took the time out of your lives to join us and be with us, especially after that very exciting storm. We weren't quite sure what was going to happen. So we're glad to see so many of you here together. So over the course of the next hour that we're together, we're going to talk a little bit about StoryCorps. We're going to listen to some stories together from the StoryCorps archive and reflect on the power of sharing our stories, and then invite you to share your story as part of the Sharing Our Stories project at Central Synagogue. So a few quick notes. I just want to get us oriented today. We are going to spend an hour together this evening. I know a lot of you have your camera on. If you're comfortable and able, we encourage you to keep your camera on so we can all connect and see each other, but really do what feels best and feels comfortable for you throughout the evening if you want to turn your camera on or off. We're going to be listening and reflecting together. And so we'll be using the chat function a lot in the Zoom today. So as we have questions, we'll invite you to share your thoughts Share your reflections with us and with each other using that chat button on the bottom of your screen in your menu. And then over the course, maybe throughout the time, we might ask you if you'd like to share your thoughts in the group, and we might call on some of you to raise your hand, and we can have you unmute and talk with us. So we'll prompt you throughout the time. And then before we leave this evening, again, we're going to be presenting and sharing with you tonight, but before we leave, we're going to have some time for you to ask us all of the questions that you have about StoryCorps, about the project. So we'll make sure that we have time for that before we go. So Mara has hopefully you can all see the chat. Mara has chatted in there so that we can all see. We really like to feel connected every time we come together in these virtual spaces. So we're asking you right now to take some time and in the chat, say hello to each other and tell us who you are. I guess we can see your name, where you're joining from. I know we're in a lot of different places. That's the beauty of us joining virtually. And then tell us just one thing that's brought you joy recently. So as you start to chat, really encourage you to find that chat button and write a note, and you can even select that you want to send that message to everyone. I'll start and just say to you, my name is Emily, as Rabbi Berman said. I am sitting here in my home/office in Jersey City, New Jersey. StoryCorps, our home is in Brooklyn, but right now we've been remote recently. And one thing that's brought me joy recently was today's storm. That was beautiful. I have always loved thunderstorms, and I got to see some amazing lightning and listen to thunder outside of my window today. Mara, do you want to say hello so everyone sees your face and you can tell yours, and then we can share some from the group?
Great. Thank you so much, Emily. Again, my name is Mara Johnson. I am also with StoryCorps. I've been there about 6 years. I'm really excited to be here with you all this evening. I'm joining from my home in Windsor Terrace, Brooklyn. And one thing that brought me joy recently was I volunteer at a community garden around the corner from my house. And this morning I was on watering shift, and I got to spend an hour just in the garden alone and peaceful this morning, just getting to be with the plants. So that was very joyful.
Amazing. Thanks, Mara. So I'm seeing that we have people joining from Manhattan and Cape Cod and New Jersey and Maryland and Chicago, and I'm probably missing some along the way, but this is really beautiful that we can all be here together. You can also read through the chat. There's really exciting, joyful moments that are coming through here. I'm going to just try to see if I can catch some of them. Granddaughters, friends, Barbara sang a song to a senior today that brought joy to them. There's so much here. Flowers, graduations, harvesting vegetables. I cannot get to all of them right now. So thank you so much for sharing all of this. And I hope that you all take time to really celebrate each other's joys. That is really beautiful. So we are so excited to be here with you. This is just the beginning of the sharing that we'll do together. And I am going to pass it over to Mara to just give you an introduction of what is this thing called StoryCorps that we do and that's coming to work together with Central Synagogue this year.
Great, thanks, Emily. So yeah, I would love to give you a little bit of background about who we are at StoryCorps and what we do. And I think as I dive in, I'd love just to see a show of hands. If you want to actually physically raise your hand on the video and wave at us, and or use the reaction and raise your hand that way. I'd love just to see who has heard of StoryCorps before, just to get a general sense. Great. So a lot of people seem to have maybe heard of us. Maybe some people are new as well. That's great. And would also love to hear in the chat if anyone has recorded with us before, or perhaps shared a story in one of our booths. I always feel like we're coming across people who have recorded in the past, and that's lovely to hear. So if you've had any experiences with us before, or if there's anything you know about StoryCorps, feel free to share that in the chat. So as we dive in, I'd love just to talk a little bit about who we are at StoryCorps. So StoryCorps is a national nonprofit. We're based here in New York City. Our offices are in Fort Greene, Brooklyn. And our mission, as you can see here, is really to bring people together around shared conversations so that they can preserve their stories and build connections between the people that they care about. And really it's in this larger idea of building a more compassionate world. So StoryCorps started here in New York City over 17 years ago, right here, as you can see at Grand Central Terminal. And we had this little booth that we built right in the corner of one of the busiest transit hubs in the city. And it was soundproof. You could come inside with a friend or family member and make an appointment, and you'd be greeted by one of our staff members and walked through the recording process. And when you walked in, you kind of could escape. You can imagine the magic of kind of walking into the soundproof booth. Outside, the hustle and bustle of the city is around you, but you can go in there and sit down and share a conversation with someone that matters to you. So these conversations are really small moments for us to come together and celebrate the relationships that bring joy and meaning to our lives. At the end of the conversation, you'd leave with a copy of the recording, and you could also decide to have another copy sent to the StoryCorps archive at the Library of Congress so that future generations could listen to and learn from your conversation. And from this initial booth, we have grown to be a national organization. We record all across the United States, and we record thousands of these types of conversations each and every year. And you can see one of our booths here. We have a booth in Chicago and Atlanta. We also have a traveling booth that's in an Airstream trailer that drives from state to state. We have a mobile phone app that you can record in the comfort of your own home. And so we have lots of ways that people can record with us and preserve their memories and share them with their families and friends. And through this project so far, since 2003, we've brought together more than 600,000 people to record and archive their stories, which is one of the largest collections of human voices ever created. So as you can imagine, this past year, StoryCorps, we've had to shift gears, and a lot of our work has become much more virtual. But we still, at the heart, it's all around listening and having these important conversations with people that we care about. So we created a virtual recording platform that's very similar to a Zoom session so that people could record with friends and family members across the country while they were in quarantine and under lockdown, separated by the distance that this pandemic has really put on all of us, and still have these meaningful conversations with the people they care about. These stories we also broadcast. So we have a national public radio broadcast every Friday morning, which some of you may have heard before. And we share just a short segment of these stories on public radio for people to listen to and learn from these remarkable recordings that people have shared with us. And as always, we find the best way to get to know what StoryCorps is to listen to what we do. So I wanted to start off by just sharing one story from the archive that's a personal favorite of mine. The story comes from 2006. It was recorded right here in New York City at the Grand Central Terminal booth. This is Ken Morgenstern in the center there with his daughters, Priya and Bhavani. And they came in with their dad to talk a little bit about his life. At the time, Ken had been diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and it was really important for their family to be able to preserve some of the memories and experiences and joys that they'd shared with their father. So this was turned into an animation recently. It's a really beautiful one that we were able to share on public broadcasting, and we wanted to share it with you this evening. So let's take a listen.
I'm Bria Morgenstern.
Excuse me, can you
raise the volume?
Oh, you want me to speak louder? I can
Yeah,
raise my
louder.
volume.
Yeah.
Okay, let me turn the dial. I'm going to be interviewing my father today, and I'll be interviewing him with my sister, Bhavani. Dad, why don't you say your name and how old you are?
I'm Ken Morgenstern. I think 81.
That's right.
Is that right?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
All right, Dad, I'm going to ask you a bunch of questions,
All right.
and you'll answer them the best you can from your memory. So you came out here to New York, and then somehow you met Mom.
I mean, you're in New York.
Yeah, you did.
I don't remember how, when. Mom would remember.
She would have remembered, yeah. Our mom passed away about 4.5 years ago. Do you recall dating her?
Oh, yeah, I remember dating her. She was a sexy gal.
She was. So let's talk about your kids a little bit.
We had 4 kids. Is that the right number?
Yes, it is.
Good. They were great.
Who are they?
You, who else?
It's Priya, Bhavani.
Priya, Bhavani, and there's a man in there.
David, Dad.
David, yeah.
David's not going to be too happy when he listens to this, Dad.
Who's the best kid?
David.
He was actually the best kid. No, he
He
definitely was.
was.
And you see us all a lot still, right, Dad?
Dad?
What?
Priya was asking if you still see us a lot.
See you a lot?
Yeah, are we in your life?
Sure. What are you talking about?
We're just asking you a question.
Yeah, what's your life like now, Dad?
Oh, it's a wonderful life. I get up in the morning, go to sleep at night, and in between eat 3 meals. What's wrong with that?
It's a nice thing that it's so easy to make you happy, Dad.
I'm very much like, I think, my father.
Mm-hmm.
He was an easygoing guy. People used to call him Happy Harry. And I had a lot of its characteristics, I think.
Dad, was there anything that you wished you had gotten in life that you didn't get?
Anything I wish I had gotten in life?
Yeah.
I'm sitting here thinking, I have no regrets on anything. The important thing is I have a family that I love, and they're loving people. That's the biggest thing you can leave as a
Legacy.
legacy, yeah.
I want to tell you, Dad, that I've always considered you my guru and teacher.
Well, thank you.
I would say the same. You've been a role model for all of your family. People are constantly saying to us how lucky you are to have all of us. And I turn to them and say, we are because of him. You've created such love around you, and we want to be with you.
Thank you, honey. That's awfully nice to hear.
It's the truth.
We love you, Dad.
So this was recorded back in 2006, and just over a year later, Ken passed away. But Priya and Bhavani came back to record another story with us to remember their father. And they said that they listened to the original recording often with their siblings and Ken's over a dozen grandchildren. And they said that they often think of their father, that he had the opportunity to say what is important in his life, and then it really came down to love. And so we think about StoryCorps conversations as these little poems about who we are as people, and that each conversation is unique, but they all have something in common. They all show the power of taking time to step away from our day-to-day lives and ask each other meaningful questions. And so we want to take a moment now as we're reflecting on this story and this idea of sharing our own stories to think a little bit about these questions you can see here. And we'd love for you to share in the chat just some general responses and what ways you think of yourself as a storyteller, and also what role stories play in your life, in your family, or in your work. And if you just want to take a moment and maybe share a few reflections, we'd love to hear from you in the chat. And if anyone wants to raise their hand and share perhaps a quick reflection with the larger group, that's also more than welcome. So Feel free to add any thoughts in the chat, and or you can raise your hand and we'd love to hear from you. We'll just take a few moments here to reflect together. Great. I see Len has a hand raised. Would you like to share with us?
Sure. So I was just chatting with Emily and asking if you did work with hospice patients, but in answer to your question, I think that storytelling varies where you are in what stage of your life. So it could be to validate who you are in your career. It could be to validate where you stand in your family. It could be to create a legacy, but it could also be used at end of life to share thoughts and feelings that will last beyond, and ensure that your story remains vibrant within friends and family. So I feel like it varies depending on where you are and what stage of life.
That's great. Thank you so much for sharing. And Marshall, would you like to also share?
Briefly, hi. The UPS truck just delivered well, so I may have the wrong question here. But no, I'm a novelist. I'm a writer. I tell stories all day long. They're made up. A lot of what I write is crime fiction, but it's based on. It has to have the ring of truth. In fact, I spend a lot of time working with a cop to make sure that I'm doing it the right way. But also, you know, I posted in the chat, I just met a woman. Someone sent me a text and said, my friend Karen needs a toast for her daughter's wedding, and I told her you'd be perfect. And I was about to blow her off when, you know, I realized Karen was copied on the text. And she immediately writes me, oh, thank you for helping. My husband passed away. So all of a sudden, but I'm telling her story. I'm telling it in a way that she can't. And so, and of course I listen to StoryCorps, and I'm often reminded of stories that my grandparents told me, especially my grandmother's famous recipe for peasant chicken soup. She starts like this. She was a peasant farm girl. First, you steal a chick. That's my story.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing. Yeah, food often comes up in our archive. We have plenty of people who actually read aloud family recipes or talk about memories around food. So that can come up a lot. I think we have time for maybe just one more comment. I'm so sorry, sir. I don't see your actual name, but you're joining from an iPad and I see you next in line with the glasses.
Okay.
Great.
This
Yes.
is Ron Tabak. I was just going to say that in both my work and in my family, storytelling plays a good role. I recently, this week, had somebody at my law firm said she loves my stories. And what I use my stories for is to illustrate how meaningful it can be to do pro bono work for particular kinds of clients and what difference it makes. And then in my other life, rest of my regular life, I've increasingly been telling stories about people no longer alive in our family to younger people in the family who never met the people, never even heard of some of them. And they are finding that to be very valuable as a way of conveying things onto another generation.
Yeah, that's a really important point of just being able to capture family stories and who these people are in our lineage and our families, even if we weren't able to meet them ourselves. Yeah, thank you for sharing. I'm going to pass it on to Emily. I know there's a lot of activity in the chat, and thank you all for sharing so many thoughtful ways of how you see yourselves as storytellers and how stories play an important role in your lives. That's really great to see. Emily's going to take it away with a little bit more information about this specific project and how we'll be working with Central Synagogue.
Great, thanks, Mara. And really, all of you, if you have the opportunity to reflect and read more of the chat as you're also listening to Mara and I, it's exciting to see all of you really reflect on your desire, how you already use stories in your life and your desire to really share them. And that's exciting because I'll just say a little bit more than what Rabbi Berman has already shared about what we're doing together for the next year, really to be able to record and listen to and preserve the stories of all of you as part of this community at Central Synagogue. So we will be training a StoryCorps, our staff, a group of what we call facilitators from the synagogue who will be helping to record conversations throughout the coming year. And help you make the most of your recording. And with your permission, you'll share those, and those will become a part of StoryCorps' archive, which is preserved by the Library of Congress for generations to come, and also part of an archive here at Central Synagogue. And I know what Rabbi Berman shared with us, that there are, a lot of plans and thoughts about how you can all really be sharing those together and listening to those together and learning from one another, so that those stories really have a life beyond just when you share them. So this summer, we'll be recording using a virtual platform. As Mara was describing, we've kind of made a shift in the past year so that we can be together even when we have to be geographically apart. So we'll all help you gather on a platform similar to what we're using right now, but really designed specifically for StoryCorps recordings. And then later this year, we'll start shifting to have the opportunity to come back together in person so you can record your conversations. So that's just a brief overview. There will be more information to come about the details of how all of that will work. But we're very excited to be working together to know that you can all participate in StoryCorps, and we can help you preserve and archive these stories together. So of course, though, our favorite thing to do is to be sharing stories and reflecting on them. So we're going to continue to think about the power of our personal narratives together and reflect on this question: why do stories matter? Why do our stories matter? And we're going to do this by just listening to some more stories from the StoryCorps archive about community and family. So we'll listen to two of them pretty much in succession, and then we'll provide an opportunity for all of us to really reflect on those together. So first, this is Sharon and Larry Adams. In 1997, Sharon Adams felt a call, and after 30 years away from her hometown in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, she moved back to the house that she grew up in. And as she was fixing up her family home, she needed an electrician, and that's how she met her now husband, Larry. And they have since completed several projects around that house, but their biggest undertaking came when they actually turned to the area outside of their home. So at StoryCorps, they came to remember together how their relationship grew, and along with that, their involvement in the community grew. So let's listen to that.
I was a contractor, and I was asked to come rewire the house. And somewhere you asked, did I want tea? I had 5 jobs going on at the same time. I'm smoking 2 packs of cigarettes a day and didn't have time for none of that. But out of my mouth came yes.
And you drank tea with me, and you fixed my switch.
Free of charge.
Free of charge. And I knew you were looking at me, and I never met anyone who had such a gentleness and a firmness at the same time and wouldn't let me look deep into his eyes.
I wanted to finish the job so that I could fire myself from the job. Then I would engage in dealing with you.
So we didn't see each other for a while.
That's true.
And then
we went for ice cream.
that was our first date.
I'm thankful to God every day since. And I remember in conversation, you told me Walnut Street was a place historically where African-American entrepreneurs had resided. And in this area, there were elm trees up and down the block that kissed in the middle of the street.
Right. So it was very dark on this block, right? Because most of the homes were
It
boarded.
was.
And Christmas Eve, we were sitting in the kitchen looking out.
And you said, what's going on with those flickering of those lights? And it was crack pipes.
We looked at each other and said,
It's not right.
it's not right.
And you said,
I want you to do that house, please. I just say please, right?
oh, absolutely. Your eyes always say please. That was the first renovation on this block.
So The renovation of our own home became secondary to the renovation of our community. And there is such a blessing in the commitment that you and I have for each other. And I get great joy when that commitment manifests itself, block by block, household by household.
Before I was renovating homes, but to take it deeper, to renovate communities is a purposeful life.
I love you.
Love you too, baby. I was a
So Sharon and Larry together, they established a nonprofit called Walnut Way that was dedicated to revitalizing their neighborhood. And so in the past 2 decades, they built and restored more than 100 homes and transformed over 20 lots into gardens and orchards. And you can see them here in front of some of the peach trees. So let's keep going. We'll listen together to another story. This time, we'll hear siblings, a brother and sister, talking together and remembering their parents. So siblings Abe and Esther Schuster are children of Holocaust survivors. You can see their parents here, their father Judel and their mother Pauline. Both of them, Judel lost his parents and his sister in the Sarny ghetto, and Pauline lost her family during the Nazi occupation of Uman, then part of the Soviet Union. So the two of them that you see here, they met in Stalingrad and married there in 1945, shortly before they entered a displaced persons camp in Italy. And then 4 years later, they left Europe and arrived by boat to New York. At StoryCorps, Abe and Esther, their children, sat down to remember their parents' philosophy of life. And as Abe's high school math teacher would learn, that didn't always mean following the rules. So let's listen to them together.
Dad said, "So, Mrs. Dinwiddie, how is mine Abe doing in the math class?" And she said, "Well, he sleeps a lot in class. He stares out the window. He doesn't do his homework, and he doesn't seem to be paying attention very well." And Dad said, "You know, Mrs. Dinwiddie, you should be ashamed of yourself. My Abe has jobs. He works after school. He knows a lot of friends and has fun in the evenings. So, of course, he's going to be sleepy. And probably you are boring him."
We could do no wrong in their
No.
eyes. You know, I would be upset because I'd get an 89 and they go, 89, that's wonderful. You did the best you could. The other thing they would always say to us was, the only thing that's important is you learn how to do something that you can make a living at. Because really, they knew that that was survival. When did you first realize that we were kids of Holocaust survivors?
I knew they were from Europe. I knew they'd lost their family. But I think the first time, Esther, I really figured it out was in 8th grade. You know, in history class, we saw these movies, these Holocaust horror movies. And I think that's the first time I actually realized what happened to our grandparents and aunts and uncles.
Part of it was even just our names. We knew we were named after people who died too soon, who there was a lot of pain about. You know, like Mom always used to say, "You're my mother, you're my mother." And I'm so glad to have you because you're my mother. I think that we had this vision of life and death that was maybe different from other kids our age. But they also taught us the pleasure in small things.
They never were kids. They never played. So sometimes you can make up for things later.
I remember when we would go to Crystal Beach and there was that little store on the corner and we would stop, we would get an orange soda.
Absolutely.
And, you know, Mom, you would have thought somebody bought her a diamond ring.
And all the neighborhood kids would go to the pool and swim in the summer. And Dad went with me,
Uh-huh.
smoking, big old belly.
Yeah.
And he climbed up and he went down the slide. And everybody's looking at him. And I'm like, "Yeah, that's my dad." Whatever. But that's how he was. He was like a kid.
We were lucky. We were very lucky to have them as parents,
Yeah.
despite their suffering, despite their pain. they were able to teach those lessons of live now, love hard, and appreciate everything.
Dad's.
Okay. So as we come back together, we come back to the question, why do stories matter? Why do our stories matter? So let's take a few moments to reflect on these questions that you see here. Why do you think these were important stories for those participants to share? And what impact did listening to those stories have on you? So we're going to break into small groups and just take a few minutes together to be able to talk about that with each other. And then we'll come back together as a group and share a little bit more about some ideas and tools for you to share your own stories. Okay, great. I see our numbers are back. I see a nice big crowd again. So like I said, I know that's never enough time. I hope that you were able to really begin a conversation with your small room. We want to be mindful of time. We have about 15 minutes together tonight. So I invite you, if there's something that really stuck with you from your conversation that you want to share out with everyone, really to put that in the chat so that we all have the opportunity to really reflect and think about that. And then I hope you continue those conversations, that Rabbi Berman finds ways for us to continue those conversations to think about how we're impacted by stories, and especially stories like these. So I invite you to do that. And then I'm gonna pass it along to Mara again so that she's just gonna share a little bit about sort of what happens next. What does it look like to participate in this with StoryCorps and Central Synagogue? And we're going to give you a few tips for doing that and tools to make that easier for you.
Great, thanks so much. And there's some really great comments. And definitely agree that oftentimes people will say that they don't have a story worth sharing or worth preserving in this way, but as we've seen in our archive, everyone has a story that's really worth sharing and worth preserving. And we also invite you to check out the StoryCorps archive, where you can listen to the full-length recordings of many of the clips we've shared with you today. So thank you all again and welcome back. As Emily brings up the slides, I just wanted to go over a few things around how to prepare and what to expect in these recordings. We often use the words recording or interview, but again, the StoryCorps model is really one all around conversations. So how it works is that you'd want to invite someone from your life, a friend, a family member, a loved one, to come and record with you. And the nice thing is our recording platform is virtual. So you'd be able to invite someone that you perhaps don't live close to. You might be physically separated in some way in different cities even, but they could join you in this virtual recording space to share a conversation together. And then later in the summer, as Emily mentioned, there'll also hopefully be an opportunity towards the end of the year as we open back up slowly in the city to also be able to record in person once safety guidelines are more allowing for that. So this conversational model, again, the process is really that you'd be greeted by someone from Central Synagogue that's been trained to facilitate your interview and walk you through and really act as a guide. They'd welcome you, they'd go through all of the archival paperwork with you and just make sure that you know exactly what the process is step by step. And then at the end, whether you're in person or virtual in our virtual recording space, you would have the option to sign a release form, and that would allow your story to be housed at the StoryCorps archive and at the Library of Congress. And also a copy would be shared with Central Synagogues that they would be able to highlight and preserve these stories as kind of a community archive for the synagogue. And just a few resources that I wanted to highlight as well that are important going forward. There's going to be two great tools that will help you as you prepare. One is that we've been working with Rabbi Berman and the team at Central Synagogue. Oh, that's a great question. So there's a suggested question list that we've been working on that's coming in the chat now that we encourage you to download and check out. And this has a lot of questions, that are specific to the Sharing Our Stories project, a little bit about perhaps your specific experience at Central Synagogue. And there's really specific experiences for the community, as well as just great general questions about your own lives, experiences. And so we encourage you to check that out and try out a few of those questions, asking each other those questions. In general, a good rule of thumb is these are recordings that are about 40 minutes long. And that can sound like a lot of time, but time goes by really quickly. So in general, maybe 5 to 7 thoughtful questions will really open up a 40-minute conversation and really take up that full amount of time. There's also a really great interview planning worksheet that Emily will drop in the chat. And this has just a nice way for you to maybe meet with your interview partner in advance and go through some of the questions you'd like to ask one another. It can be helpful to flag anything you might not want to talk about. These are recordings, and if you want it to be shared in the archive, it's nice to say, there might be spots in my life that are off limits or things I don't want to have recorded in this space. So that's good to flag there. And then just kind of setting goals for your recording, what your intentions are, what you want to get out of this. You really make sure you're on the same page. Another great thing about that worksheet is there's some really fantastic follow-up questions along the side. So we definitely encourage you as you're going through these conversations, you'll have these questions planned out and you'll have a certain sense of how you want the conversation to go. But oftentimes you're just going to go with your curiosity. You might hear a certain story that sparks your curiosity or your interest. And asking these types of follow-up questions can really help you dig deeper with your interview partner and get out more of their story and be able to really connect in new ways. So we definitely encourage you to check out those follow-up questions and just take some time to think about what you want to achieve and what you want to share in these recordings. And the nice recording, perhaps you would do a recording with your grandchild. There may be a whole other side of your story that doesn't happen in that recording. You could come back and record with your sister or your neighbor or your best friend. So there's ways that you can continue to record and have multiple stories that come out of this experience. So I wanted to do just one last reflection question for the group before I pass it back to Rabbi Berman with some additional information, and we'll also have time for Q&A in just a short time. But I just wanted to hear from the group if you had just one person to share in the chat, someone that you are thinking about recording with. So if you feel comfortable just sharing, it could also just be your relationship to that person if you don't want to put their name, but perhaps it's your daughter, it might be your best friend, maybe a niece or nephew that has become important in your life that you're close with. Just love to hear who people are thinking about inviting to record and what that could mean. And thank you all for those that are sharing in the chat. Great. So I don't know, Rabbi Berman, would you like to jump in with a few more kind of logistical information, and then we can do a quick Q&A?
Sure. Our logistics are very, very short for tonight. We will be putting our suggested questions. We will be putting information about the technologies that we use and information about signing up for a facilitated and recorded conversation. We will be putting all of that up on our website, and we will be following up with an email with a message to everybody who attended and everybody who wants to participate. Because those are not yet on our website, we don't have a link to send you to tonight, but we will soon. We will very shortly. So our facilitators are going to be gathering next week to begin their training, and our conversations will begin shortly thereafter.
So I saw that there already were some questions, I think, that started coming in. So maybe we'll take we have a few minutes together. So let's take some of those questions, and we'll keep an eye on the time just so that anyone who wants to stick around once we're done, we'll play one more story because we can't help ourselves.
Looks like there's one question, Emily, that's a great one about the role of the facilitator. If you want to just give a quick overview of what they are, what they do in the interview.
Perfect. Thanks, Mara. So what the facilitator does is they are there really to walk you through the entire process of recording your conversation. So they're there to make sure that you know what to do and what to expect, so that the only thing that you have to worry about is actually having the conversation. The facilitator is going to take care of all of the technical parts of the recording so that it sounds really amazing. They're going to be listening while you have the conversation so that they can help archive that and make sure that people will be able to find it in the archive if you decide to share it there later. And then they're there to help you really get the most out of your conversation. So when you share with them the stories you'd like to share, they might jump in and ask some additional questions, or really just make sure that you feel really comfortable in that recording time. And as Mara mentioned earlier, they're just walking you through also the technically the whole process and talking you through those release forms, that if you decide to share your conversation with StoryCorps, with the Library of Congress, with Central Synagogue, that there's just paperwork to fill out, and they're going to walk you through that whole process. I know I think I saw coming through, I'll answer this question because there's a question about time. So we have been listening to these little excerpts of conversations that we've produced to share in this way, but a typical conversation is 40 minutes long. And that full interview is what's archived with StoryCorps and the Library of Congress. And so we typically use that 40 minutes as the length guide. And you can use as much or as little of that time as you'd like.
If anyone has any other questions, feel free to add them in the chat, and we'll stick around a little after the hour. But perhaps we could, oh, there's one other good question about, are this recorded archived? And I can answer that. Again, it's up to you. So after you've done your recording and know what you've spoken about in your recording, you decide whether or not to sign a release form and have it be part of the larger archive. If you don't, you still get to keep a copy just for yourself and to share with family and friends. And there's no cost. So it's free to participate, free to record, and you get a copy for your own personal use, no matter what.
Yeah, great. And I see a couple more questions. If you're looking for all of those edited conversations that we've shared, so not every story, our archive, as Mara said earlier, I think we're at a number that 300,000. I'm probably don't even know the number. It's a huge archive. Not all of those have been edited and produced in that way, but those that we have, you can find on our website at storycorps.org and browse the stories. You can watch animations. You can listen to hundreds and hundreds of those conversations. I think Barry and Naomi asked, are you tied to the proposed outline? So the conversation that you have, Mara introduced that planning worksheet just as a way for you to be thoughtful and intentional about your conversation, because 40 minutes is a while, but it's certainly not long enough to talk about everything in your life. So it's just there as a guide for you to think about, what do I think I might want to talk about, and plan that. But certainly that conversation, once you get to it, is your conversation. And we invite you to move with your curiosity, go where that conversation goes. Maybe by the time you get there, you and your partner say, actually, we want to talk about something completely different. But that time is yours to use the way that you'd like to ask the questions you'd like to ask. You might use questions from the Central Synagogue question list, or you might come up with your own. And that's all okay. It's your conversation.
Emily, the one thing I would add to that is this StoryCorps exists kind of in the world independently, but also as a partnership with specific institutions and organizations. And we at Central are creating this opportunity for our Central community specifically. So whether that means telling your Central story or sharing something that might connect you more deeply with other members of our community, that's really our intention in offering this within the Central community.
Okay, I see that we're at 8:30, and I know that we didn't get to everyone's questions. As Mara said, we're going to stick around a little bit in case I know I see your hand, Linda. I think I see other questions, but for those of you who want to sort of make a close to the evening, we're just going to play one more story. And so those of you who would like to leave during or after that, just thank you for spending this time with us. We are really excited to be working with you all and partnering with you and listening to your stories over the coming year. And I'm sure maybe we'll see you again. So I'm just going to cue this up here and we'll listen to that. And then anyone who wants to stick around, we'll be here.
All right, so in this last story of the hour that we wanted to share with you, oh, I wasn't sure if we were doing an introduction. I'll quickly introduce this as a new animation that just came out this year, and it's a remembrance. It comes to us, it was recorded in California, and Kenneth Tan is remembering his grandma, Crescenciana, who just was really the center, the heart of their family. And he remembers all the experiences that brought them together as he grew up.
Lola was my first roommate when I was a kid. So we shared a room. She would keep the light on every night because she would be up praying and the light would still be on in the morning. And I just always remember her in the kitchen making hopia, smoothing out the mung bean, making little pockets with the dough and stuffing them in pink donut boxes. And she would let me eat the duds. How did I not have like childhood diabetes?
The kitchen was always greasy and the electric bill was going up. But that was Lola's business and she never stopped working. I was told that when she was little, she was the top student. But my mom did not finish high school because my grandfather passed away early. So she did all kinds of work to support her family. And when she had her children, she had to provide for us. There was nobody else. There was no such thing as vacation. And when Lola got older, she lived with us, bringing up her grandchildren.
Yeah, it was, I think, 2014. And you called me. You were caring for Lola at the time. And so I wanted to come home to help care for Lola because she'd always been the one who took care of all of us. Before she passed, she'd tell me stories about her life. And that's when Lola and I started painting them. You know, I think I learned from Lola that there's a difference between your job and your work. Your job is something you leave behind at the end of a day, but your work is everything you leave behind at the end of a lifetime. Lola, she didn't have the most glamorous jobs, but I think her work was all of us.
It's her love for us that I remember most. It was not so much of hugging or saying I love you, but it was all the things she did. You're right. We are her work.
Thank you, Emily and Mara, for everything that you've brought to us tonight and everything that we are going to be doing together over the next year. I can't wait to hear your stories and the stories that you elicit from the people that you love. So Emily and Mara are going to stick around for some more questions, but thank you so much for being here this evening, everybody. Good night.